Hi, I'm Nathaniel Pearson. This semester we studied a multitude of cultures across a wide range of historical eras. We dove into modern day concepts that derive from these eras past. We specifically concentrated on the STEM work within these cultures. In today's educational framework, if we treat STEM integration as a type of curriculum integration, it manifests its expression, a curricular approach that integrates science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEM integration offers students one of the best opportunities to experience learning in a real-world situation, rather than to learn bits and pieces and then to have to assimilate them at a later time. I will be discussing the STEM work involved during the civilization of a European native group of people known as the Greeks. Greece was not the first true civilization within the Aegean world. Before them, the Minoan and the Mycenaean people ruled the land. Around 1400 BC, catastrophe struck the great citadel of Mycenae and wiped out many of its population. The Peloponnesus too was invaded, and the noble palace of Pylos was taken over. If any of the scribes survived the initial attacks, they didn't see that the knowledge that they knew of the Mycenaean culture was important, considering they had just been essentially taken over. So anything that we know about the Greeks before then was lost, essentially lost. Social, economic, and political organization began a new era of application. Basic survival was at the top of the list of priorities for this new rising culture, which we can refer to as the Hellenic. The land around Greece experienced vast changes in climate throughout the year, so agriculture wasn't typically a desperate venture in eras of relative order. Farmers shaped their methods to fit the seasons, but there was only so much they could do, considering harsh winters and relatively dry summers. The coast of Asia Minor, however, became the most important economical and political center, as the men of power typically settled around areas where sustained survival was possible. The coast experienced Mediterranean climate patterns, which was ideal for crop yields, but still, however, it was relatively difficult to farm. A lot of what we know about this civilization stems from their art. Much of what we know about their religion and language originates from what is perceived in their paintings and pottery. In sculpture, architecture, and pottery, as also in its social, political, and religious attitudes, the Mycenaean age is an absorbing medley of forces. Through proto-geometric pottery, they illustrated the illusion of color, being able to concentrate the elutriated materials through a three-phase firing technique. They created shaped pots such as the belly-handled and neck-handled amphora, which I have a neck-handled amphora here. Very much of what we know about this civilization stems from their art. Much of what we know about their religion and language originates from what is perceived in their paintings and pottery. In sculpture, architecture, and pottery, as also in its social, political, and religious attitudes, the Mycenaean age is an absorbing medley of forces. This means, around that time during this era, a lot of the neighboring cultures, fed off of each other's methods of survival. And of course, art traveled ways, miles for people to be able to pick up on new styles of architecture and paintings as well. The Greek language, known as Indo-European Greek, was very widely used on the tablets of the Mycenae and Pylos, so we assume that this region's language began as a subversion of Indo-European Greek. This language was used in their artwork as well. By using the fast wheel to increase height and available area of decoration, Attica artists picked up on some of their techniques and later invented what we know as the Attic. A little fun fact. Through architecture, or essentially orientalizing pottery, man had deemed large, voluminous castles for their kings as a waste of their energy. They simplified their concepts regarding buildings and created methods of architecture such as the Megaran plan, or Megaran plan. It's essentially a temple had pillar systems that would hold up a very, very good amount of weight. The material that they used was quite massive. They sculpted large but simply designed symbols, such as the Parthenon, which was a temple that they crafted for the Greek goddess known as Athena, who was the Greek goddess of wisdom, craft, and war. And the only way they were able to move such massive amounts of material was through pulley and levy systems. So, if you have 10 men, they can lift a ton, or relative to what they're using. So though the idea of Greek mythology seems to be what ruled the religious views of the Greeks in their early civilization, a lot of what they worshipped was based on their survival. In times of hunger and thirst, they sacrificed their people to the gods, hoping giving the blood back to them would please the gods enough to reward them with a means of survival. And one might call all religions myth-based to begin with. However, the Greeks believed that there was a god for almost everything that their world revolved around. And the Greek influence stretches further and more prominently than most other cultures. Because of the Greeks, we created democracy. The Greeks influenced our alphabet, thus creating the need for libraries. They created the first lever and pulley system, as I mentioned before. And they sculpted lighthouses and arenas that would later hold what we now know as the Olympics. Their scientific discoveries led to what we later discovered about the Earth and our solar system and its place in it. The Greeks were ahead of their time, despite the drawbacks that occurred prior to their main civilizing. The Greeks passed their knowledge on for generations and generations, and to this day we see churches that resemble the architecture that the Greeks essentially created and essentially, coined the idea of, pottery, and the idea of putting clay into a very hot, essentially a furnace, and directing temperatures at certain parts of the material to change the color of it. They were people who were ahead of their time. They went through a catastrophic era of destruction and, power, hungry men looking to gain land and rule the people. But in my opinion, I think the Greeks are one of the more prominently placed people of our world's history.